What's up, Bills Mafia? What's happening? Ryan Thomas back on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. And of course, to my right, I am once again joined by Kyle Trimble of Banged Up Bills. You can follow him on Twitter at Banged Up Bills. I was going to tee it up for Kyle to follow him on social media, but I follow Kyle. I've had Kyle on the show a lot. I'm giving Kyle the Thomas Take endorsement that he deserves for you guys to go on Twitter, hit him up with a follow, like his content, read his articles. Very informative. Kyle, it's a pleasure having you back on the show, buddy.
Thanks for having me on, Ryan.
Of course. So we have, in case you guys have been living under a rock, we got a big game to discuss. This is the Buffalo Bills versus New England Patriots Week 16 preview show with, of course, Kyle Trimble joining me, Ryan Thomas, on the show, the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. And Kyle, it's been a bit since you've been on the show. We have a ton to discuss. But before we dive into this game, we know what's at stake. 8-6 are the Buffalo Bills. 9-5 are the New England Patriots. And I just want to ask you this question to start the show. I want to do a little bit of a brief recap of the Buffalo Bills season thus far. And recapping this season thus far has been, for me, it's been almost a shock to the system, because I thought at this point the Bills would be like 11 wins, 10 wins, 8 wins, Kyle. What the heck happened to this season? I know we still have a lot of football left. This game, the division is on the line. We know it's at stake, but just in your opinion, how have you seen this season kind of shape up so far?
A lot of inconsistency. You see the Bills play down to their opponents. We saw that with Jacksonville. We saw that with really Jacksonville is the big one that you play down with. That's one win that you wish you could have back that you don't have. Some other teams that I think that they thought that they would roll over and they didn't were Tennessee and Indianapolis. Those are two games that they should have not necessarily won convincingly, but they should have won, especially the Tennessee game. I don't know if last year they felt that they could impose their will on other teams, and that's what led them to 13-3. But this year they have a big target on their back, and teams are bringing their best at them every week. And so sometimes what worked last year didn't work this year. And that's where you see 8-6. So I think really just inconsistency in playing down the level of their opponent, which has led them to be just a game above 500.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to look at it. And the way that I haven't actually thought of myself is that, yeah, last season was last season. This season's this season. It's one more season that everybody else had a chance to kind of go back and look at what the Bills did so well and to try to combat it, obviously. And the teams that have been able to do it, you know, the Titans, obviously that was a tough loss. The Indianapolis Colts, that was a blowout. And obviously the first matchup against New England. But going into this game, we know one thing's for sure. We won't have 50-mile wins every other quarter, whether they're facing us or at our back. We won't have to deal with that. And I think that played a huge factor in the first matchup between these two teams. But looking at the opponent and knowing the opponent for this game, I think is extremely important, because at the time we played them the first time around, I think people took the Patriots seriously, but now I think people are taking the Patriots a little bit more seriously, coming off of that win over Buffalo, despite losing to the Indianapolis Colts. But I've been saying it on the show almost every week. It seems like while one person thinks the New England Patriots are as legit as anybody in the AFC, another person could think the Patriots are not as good or as legit, as I like to say. Where do you see the Patriots in this, AFC? How do you feel about the Patriots? Are the media hyping the Patriots up? Or are they a legitimate, force to be reckoned with?
I think the media has hyped them up a little bit. They go off of 2 decades of sustained success with Bill Belichick. He is a Hall of Fame coach for a reason. He has those guys ready each and every week, but I believe there is some extra hype there. I know that they did bring some guys back from the opt-outs last year. They brought in a ton of free agents. We expected them to be competitive. Obviously, to be challenging for the AFC East was not expected from being a Bills fan, But there's always those teams that rise and fall every year, and the Patriots are showing that they can still be quite competitive. I'm too young for this, but a lot of the older listeners, I'm sure, would remember Don Shula with regards to the Miami Dolphins. I can't think of a time looking back at their records or everything else like that where Shula didn't have them ready. I know that Dan Marino was up and ready and playing. I don't think he missed a ton of games. I think he had an Achilles injury at one point, but I remember the Dolphins teams, that was the stuff of legend when they went up against the Bills in the 90s and 80s. So to see that comparison with Shula and then to Belichick, they're going to have those teams ready no matter the level of talent on the field. It's just a matter of can they put it together for Super Bowl championships? And that's the difference between Shula and Belichick. But I definitely think the media has been overhyping the Patriots. I don't think they're Super Bowl contenders, but they're obviously a force to be reckoned with within the division and to a lesser extent, the conference.
And I think it's just that whole narrative that, wow, last year the Patriots they obviously had a major drop off from Tom Brady to Cam Newton, and now Cam's out of the way. He's back in Carolina, and then they bring up this Mac Jones character that I like to refer to him as, because I feel like the media has really tried to almost force the story, force the narrative of Mac Jones being the next, I guess you could say, Steve Young to Joe Montana, or the next Aaron Rodgers to Brett Favre. And I just think it's a little bit too much too soon. I correct me if I'm wrong on that. From what your statement was, are you in agreement with me that it's just a little bit too much too soon to, knight Mac Jones as the next savior of the New England Patriots?
Absolutely. It's way too soon. You throw up two great examples in Montana, Young, Favre to Rodgers. It's just those guys had time to sit on the bench and learn the system. And of course, both played under Hall of Fame coaches. Though if I recall, Holmgren, he's not in Hall of Fame yet, but he's probably worthy of it. But Bill Walsh, he was definitely a great coach.
Right.
But they will sit and learn. And with how today's NFL is, those guys don't get the opportunity to sit and learn. And if they get a year, like we saw with Patrick Mahomes, that's definitely a huge benefit. We've seen what he's done under Andy Reid's system. But it's just too soon to say that, he's the next coming, franchise savior. He might be, but to anoint him so quickly, that's going to give him a big ego, big head, and it's just not going to work well for him. That reminds me of Mark Sanchez of the Jets. He came in and he thought he was, the bee's knees when he came in, and he turned out to be nothing. He just had a great defense around him in New York with Rex Ryan, and then he came out to be nothing. So I don't see that happening with the Patriots while Belichick's on the sidelines, but you could see some similarities if things get to Mac Jones's head.
Yeah, and I think that's a cautionary tale. There's a lot of those. I mean, Mark Sanchez is one of them. You could rattle off a bunch of Cleveland Browns quarterbacks over the course of the last 20 years that were thought of as the savior that turned out that they weren't. Yes, exactly. And I mean, that is one thing that Mac Jones has done. Credit to him. He has had, a legitimate solid season. I'm not taking anything away from him in that regard. It's just the way ESPN and CBS Sports and some of these networks have kind of referred to Mac Jones as, oh, maybe they got the next Tom Brady already. I'm very, very I'm not quick to say that. I can't say that because Tom Brady is the greatest that I've ever seen. More likely than not, he's probably the greatest that you've ever seen. We're from within the same, generation of watching football. So that's heavy praise for a quarterback that, to your point, in the next, I guess, a segue here as far as a key to victory wasn't rocket science as far as how the Patriots were going to attempt to beat us in this first matchup. That we played them with, within the run game, inside the downhill running lanes, just try to be more physical in between the tackles, force Mac Jones to not really do a whole lot. And he couldn't because the wind was howling, and Mac Jones doesn't really have the strongest arm in the NFL, unlike Josh Allen. But this game, I don't expect the winds to be a factor, but going into the keys to victory here, if I'm the Buffalo Bills going into this game plan, if I'm Leslie Frazier, we talked about this before we went live, you have to force Mac Jones to pass, right? shutting down the run game is a part of that. How do you expect the Bills to kind of force the Patriots to pass outside of just the simple fact of shutting down the run game? What specifically do you hope to see, maybe even from a particular player in this game to help Buffalo force Mac Jones to pass?
As for specific player that forced them to pass, that might be out of my pay grade, I guess, if you will, to identify the player that forced them to pass. But either you get a lot of pressure in his face and give him misdirections and there's no way he knows an NFL defense to say, hey, I see what's going on out there. I can change the play to a run and just have him run down the throat again. I don't think anybody in the NFL could have predicted that they were going to run that many times last time they played a few weeks ago. So there should have been some in-game adjustments to say, hey, we can't stop the run. Let's try to do something else here. They didn't, but I just don't see them saying, hey, let's stick with what we did last time. We kept them to 14 points, but we can only score 10. So give them confusion, make those safeties work around. Mac Jones isn't good enough to pick on Dane Jackson, let's say, but put coverages out there, make him think what he's seeing one thing and then trick him into do something else. He is a rookie. Though he played in the SEC, he can be prone to mistakes. So find a way to get that ball out of his hands and not into the hands of the running backs.
Yeah, and I think too, like when I visualize it, I'm visualizing the Buffalo Bills front four to pressure Mac Jones, and just one player that I think has somewhat come on these last couple weeks. I've seen a couple plays here or there where you start to see the athleticism, the length. Gregory Rousseau, obviously Ed Oliver is stepping up in a lot of ways this year. I think he's had a really solid year. But those are the names that I'm thinking of in terms of what I envision just in shutting down Mac Jones at the line, batting down balls, trying to force Mac Jones to step up into the pocket rather than keeping him at bay, in the pocket. Even Mac Jones at bay in the pocket can still be dangerous. You force him to make that first initial step that provides him a little bit of an uncomfortability that he really hasn't experienced. I mean, you got to think of it this way too. You mentioned the SEC. He played at Bama. He practically had an NFL caliber offensive line in front of him with NFL wide receivers and NFL running backs in his backfield. So I think that is a solid key to victory as far as forcing Mac Jones to pass in this game. And I think despite a name that you mentioned, Dane Jackson, stepping in for Trey White, I wanted to ask you, as far as Trey White's injury, I know obviously he's out for the rest of this season, but what do you anticipate as far as Trey White, as far as the timetable on his injury? Kyle Trimble of Banged Up Bills, just from everything you know about ACL injuries and rehabilitation, what would you say as far as Trey White's injury? What's the timetable?
So he's looking at anywhere from 9 to 12 months for a recovery. We know that there was an ACL tear. There is a small meniscus tear, or I shouldn't say small, but we know there was a meniscus tear. We don't know how severe it was, but whether they just trim it out or repair it, that's not really going to affect the overall timeline for recovery. But considering where he was at with regards to the time in the season where he tore the ACL, it was on Thanksgiving. He had surgery about 3 weeks later, which is what they try to do. They let the swelling go down. They try to maximize the range of motion prior to surgery, and they start working on the musculature around the knee to try to build it up as much as they can. So when he does have the surgery, the body doesn't go down into that preservation mode. I look at it as the body perceives the surgery as an injury and wants to protect itself. So if it primes the body getting ready for the rehab, then he can kind of hit the ground running, literally and figuratively, when he goes to rehab, instead of trying to push the rock back up the hill, if you will. So look at a timeline to return. Week 1 is going to be really tough. He would require a great rehab. We're talking Adrian Peterson-esque rehab in terms of pushing itself. I don't anticipate the MVP level, return or anything like that. But the idea is how quickly Adrian Peterson came back, because he tore his ACL roughly the same time frame in the NFL season that Trey White did. But everybody's different. I don't recall Adrian Peterson having that type of injury before, but he was an animal. I mean, he was an outlier with this injury. So week 1 is going to be a real push. I don't see Trey White playing much in the preseason. Considering the money he's being paid, the amount or what he means to the team, I don't think they're going to rush him back. So we saw what happened when Trent Murphy tried rushing back. We saw it when Harrison Phillips, he didn't necessarily rush back, but we still saw him take a significant amount of time to really get back to form. Leslie Frazier said the other day he's playing the best he has since before he tore his ACL. So you're looking at a start on the PUP list with Trey White coming back around after week 6, which is possible. Things can and do change. I'd love to see him back playing week 1 at an all-pro level, but we just don't see that coming off an ACL tear at a cornerback position. He has to react to everything. The bye takes longer than the 9-12 months that we put on it from a physical standpoint.
Ooh, we got cut off there. You still on me?
Yeah, I don't know what happened there.
That was weird. I've never had that happen. So that'll be something for the audio audience to be like, hey, what? It's like dead air for like 15 seconds. That was so weird. Sorry about that. So as far as what you were saying, going back to Adrian Peterson and Trey White, that you provided like a similar timetable for not just for the injury, but they literally did suffer the same injury at almost the same time during the season. How is it different just from your experience and just from how you see this injury? How is it any different for a corner in terms of the type of rebuild that it'll take, because he's a backpedaler or a downhill runner as far as making tackles, whereas Adrian Peterson was cutting and trying to dig into the ground and springboard off that knee? Do you think there's any sort of different rehabilitation that they might try with Trey White in comparison to what the Vikings did back in the day with AP?
That's a really good question. The rehab is going to be similar in that they're going to focus on the protocols. They're going to focus on the main objectives and look at the outcome measures, try to get him back as best as he can. The difference between Pearson and White is that Pearson can dictate the action. White has to react to the action. So Peterson, once again, an outlier. He's able to dictate whether you want to go right or left or jump or whatever you want to do. So he was relying on his knee to make sure that he could do everything possible. White has to be able to react to what that offensive player is doing. So he has to see the play. He has to say, this is what I want to do. And then he has to go. So he's already a step behind because he doesn't know what is going on with the play. And then you're trying to react as quickly as you can. And no one has cat-like reflexes. They're not going to be right there. I mean, even the best Hall of Fame cornerbacks, they're not going to be able to jump on the ball every single time. So they're probably going to go a lot more with proprioception where he's out in the field, try to do more reactionary stuff and just try to get him to move as smoothly as possible. So when he does see and understand what's going on, he can react as quickly as he can so as he's not losing a step to his offensive counterpart.
Nice. I like it. I'm excited just to see players step up. I hate to say excited because obviously I want Trey White out there as much as anybody, but it creates opportunity, right? And for a guy like Dane Jackson, who I've keyed in on these last few weeks. Obviously, with Trey White out, you want to see how Dane Jackson does, and I really like what I've seen from Dane Jackson. He's been solid in coverage. He's been aggressive. He's been a solid tackler, and make no mistake about it. This game is kind of etched in his memory because the last one, the first start that he had, coming off of White's injury, was against New England. So wherever he might have went wrong, I'm sure is burning inside of him and trying to redeem that. So I'm looking forward to that too. That's a player that I think a lot of Bills fans will be keeping their eyes out on. Another key to victory that, we kind of touched on in forcing Mac Jones to pass would be containing this Patriots run game. It looks like Damian Harris could be a game time. He's had injury issues throughout the entire year. Talk a little bit about the availability or lack thereof of Damian Harrison, and do you expect him to play this weekend?
Harrison, he was limited in practice on Wednesday. There's a good chance he does play. From what we were seeing, he was a close call for the Colts, from what I read, and they said to hold him out. You got to wonder if he would have made a difference with regards to them winning the actual game there, though I don't think he would have. I expect him to play just based off of how they operate everything with regards to injuries over there in New England. I don't know he'll be 100%. He did have the benefit of the bye week after the game, and then he sat out last week. So you're going on, going almost 3 weeks there since he's played. But I still don't think that they're going to run him into the ground. They're not going to give him the number of touches that they did against the Bills. I hope that they wouldn't. We also know that Ramondre Stevenson was out with an illness. Brandon Bolden's dealing with a knee injury. So they've always done a running back by committee as it is. So if it's, kind of what you said before, next man up. If it's not Harris, it's going to be Stevenson. If he's healthy enough, if it's not Stevenson, Bolden. If it's not Bolden, it's somebody else there. So I believe Harrison will play. He might have his touches limited. I don't think he'll be as effective, but I expect other guys to get in the mix and still try to push the run game as much as they can, because if, as they say, you respect the run, then you can really dictate the terms of the game.
Of course. And I think us going there to New England, to Foxborough, Gillette Stadium, these fans, Kyle, when I was doing the post-game show, these fans, referring to the Patriots fans, when I was doing the post-game show, I had comments from people from Boston, from Charlestown, from Lowell, from everywhere in Massachusetts, talking smack, saying, we look forward to playing you on the 26th. We'll be right back at it against you on the 26th. So this is a massive opportunity in terms of this season has not gone our way. I think it's safe to say it hasn't gone the way that we thought it would. And it hasn't gone the way that they thought it would, the players and the Buffalo Bills. And to say that we still have an opportunity to take the AFC East or to maintain more control over the AFC East, I can't believe I'm saying that. You know what I mean? Like 8-6, the Patriots are 9-5, and we still have a shot. And to go in there and to shut up that fan base, for me, would be it would make this season worth it. It would make the journey that has been this season worth it. I want to ask you too, as far as this 8-6 record that the Bills have offensively, it hasn't been this, hot offense, just Josh Allen dinking and dunking and firing all over the field like it was last year. And Allen, much like the majority of the quarterbacks in the league, they have a tough time going up against Bill Belichick. He's a genius defensively. What type of pace do you hope to see from the Buffalo Bills offense in this one as far as setting the pace offensively?
I want to see them establish the run game like they did last week. I don't think they're going to have the type of production they did. New York has a better defense. They know how to game plan. I mean, you're dealing with Belichick. He knows how to game plan pretty much against everybody. I don't think there's too many times where he gets fooled. But we need to get the running backs going early. Maybe throw in a Josh Allen run here and there. His foot is looking better. But really just kind of keep them on their toes and say, hey, we're not going to allow you to make us one-dimensional and make it so that you can control the tempo of the game there. So like it says on the screen there, set the pace offensively. We got to make sure that they can get out and do what they need to do, maybe get an early score, and really just say, hey, we're here and we're not going to let you control this game. It sounds like a pretty simple answer, but sometimes simple is the easiest method to moving forward.
It cut out on me right at the end there. You said sometimes simple. I heard bits of it, but then it cut out. I'm sorry.
So simple. I don't remember what that guy just said now. So sometimes, what's the phrase? KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. So Let's keep it simple. There's no need to overthink this. Establish why you're there. Be aggressive, and don't let them know that they can control you.
Yeah, and I actually think that's a really great point that I wanted to try to hammer home too. It's almost like, I love Sean McDermott to death. I think he's a great coach. We wouldn't be where we are without him. But when they play the Patriots, it's almost as if they go in thinking, let's do what they're doing. Let's try to play their game. It's like, let's play our game. Let's not let the Patriots be like this bully that's just poking us with a stick on us. Let's actually grab the stick, snap it, and maybe hit them back with it. It's kind of a weird analogy, but at the same time, I was a little bit embarrassed after that loss. I think Jerry Sullivan asked the question literally to the players. I don't know if I'd have the cojones to do that, but I was embarrassed in terms of how they bullied us around and played this 1965 run it down your throat, be physical, hit you in the mouth type football. And we definitely got beat up in that game. Now I want to see us start the game, to your point, with a run game, try to set a tone and be multidimensional rather than one-dimensional like we have been for quite some time. And then just let the chips fall where they may after that. Just enter the game with an open game plan rather than going in saying, okay, whatever they're going to do, we're going to try to copy it or try to do it back. It just doesn't work. It's never worked against Bill Belichick in any facet. And I have a time believing that, you don't go into this one, Sean McDermott dialed up, trying to enforce, hey, let's pressure Mac Jones. Just simply pressure him, force him to move, because Mac Jones isn't even 1/10 the athlete that Josh Allen is, in my humble opinion. So that's what I hope to see defensively and offensively, to your point. I want to see a run game. I hope to see it. I hope that they can come out and establish it a little bit. But you got to be having a little bit of I don't want to say a field day. That might not be the right, term. But with all these injuries on the Bills and the offensive line being completely reshaped and reconfigured over the course of last week, you saw the ticker at the start of the game. Their offensive line was completely different than what they started the season with. Any word on the health of the John Felicianos or some of these other names out there that have been out due to COVID? Have you heard anything positive, Kyle, for me? I'm hoping that line's healthy.
I wish I could give you, a ton of good information, but I'm getting the reports just as you guys are. Most of the guys I know on the list right now are vaccinated. Obviously, Cole Beasley being one of them that isn't. You wish that they weren't getting, infected, or that they're showing symptoms or whatnot. But this is just a weird thing, a weird time in history. We're going to look back and think either, wow, we were lucky to get through that, or what were we doing? But you got to hope that these guys get cleared and they're not having too many issues. We did see John Feliciano. He's been pretty open about his bout with COVID. We do know he's vaccinated. You got to hope that he's going to come back soon once he's free of symptoms. But it's just a really guessing game when you see whether these guys are cleared, per the new NFL protocols that keep changing day by day. But you mentioned a field day. I don't even know that I can even really talk to it as much with the COVID stuff, because that stuff continues to keep changing. Whereas injuries, hey, I can have more of a firm grasp on that stuff. So that's more of an uncertainty to look at the COVID stuff than it is with the injuries. I can at least tell you with some certainty whether that guy's going to play or be effective. COVID, it's, a dice roll.
Right. And to your point, like I said injuries, but the majority of these players that were hurt aren't hurt, but they're sick, which is crazy. Like they were players that were hurt, now they're sick. Like Star Latuile, he was out, missed some games. Now he's tested positive he had a positive test for COVID too, if my memory serves me right. Dion Dawkins, he's had multiple bouts with COVID that he even openly admitted it sapped a ton of his strength heading into this season, and he's just tried to build back what he was, and now that he's got his second bout with it. But I don't want to get too deep into the virus because we hear enough about it all day. We can flip to the channels and they're talking about it on every channel. But just in terms of the echoes of the game, and being that this is such an important game, I mean, given that they're 8-6 and the AFC East division is still in play, and to lose a guy like Cole Beasley, who do you see taking that spot on Sunday that we'll talk about on Monday and days after? Oh, that guy stepped up in the absence of Cole Beasley. Who do you see that player being?
I know the two names, or the one name has been floated around, is Emmanuel Sanders, but I would prefer to see Isaiah McKenzie. We know Sanders is dealing with the right knee injury. I don't quite know the specifics of it, but you got to assume that he's probably not 100%, even if he does come and play on Sunday. They did deem him week to week, but you saw when Isaiah McKenzie was in this offense last year, what he could do. He's small, he's shifty, he plays a similar game to Cole Beasley, at least in the slot. Obviously you can't replace an all pro player like that, but can they get him in there to at least tip the defense as to what's going on, or give him different looks? Like there's too many things that he does well that they should try to utilize that. I know he's used as a scout team quarterback. He drives the defense nuts. Get him to drive the Patriots defense nuts. I want to see him more in there. I don't know he's the long-term answer, but he's a guy that knows the offense. He's been around for a while. Get him in there and see what he can do. I mean, you could do worse than Isaiah McKenzie when it comes to replacing Cole Beasley.
Yeah, and I think to your point, Isaiah McKenzie is one of those players that they had him lined up as a returner, and for obvious reasons, he can turn an angle. He's shifty, as you mentioned. He's got speed. But I actually think he was misused in this offense this year. I definitely understand why they put him in as a returner, but I like Stevenson back there. I think he provides a little bit different of a speed dimension, and he's just a little bit more return savvy, whereas McKenzie is more route running savvy. I would trust McKenzie more as a route runner than I would Stevenson. So, Cole Beasley being out, typically, if you were to say, oh, Cole Beasley's out, if this was the 2009 Buffalo Bills and Cole Beasley was the number 2 wide receiver of this team, and you had Stevie Johnson on the other side, or, 2011 Bills, I guess you could say David Nelson. Shout out to those guys, no disrespect. But my point is that's when the Bills had very little depth at that position. Now I can say to myself, okay, yeah, Cole Beasley being out, it's unfortunate. Josh Allen loves him as a safety valve. He's just as good as a running back. He picks up 4 or 5 yards or more, depending on, the slot route. But at the same time, they do have depth. And I think, a lot of Bills fans are frustrated, especially over, the course of the offseason when they saw his tweets. And now that he's tested positive, it doesn't look good. The optics are pretty bad. But it's football. And that's really what I care about is the football. These guys, everybody has their choice that they make, right? Whether they decide to do it, whether they don't, that's their choice. That's my opinion, but I think we got to hold off on the Cole Beasley haters and criticism and understand that he wanted to be in this game as much as anybody. This is the biggest game of the season for the Bills to date. And I would say, I think it's a safe assessment, Kyle, that Cole would want to be out there just as much as anybody, right?
Absolutely. He was saying that it's not that he can't play, it's the rules are preventing him from playing. And I believe Josh Allen even said that during Wednesday's press conference, that that's how the rules were. And he tiptoed around some of the other stuff that was said, but they really saying the rules, and rules are rules right now. So whether you like them or not, that's what it was established between the NFL and the NFLPA. So hate it, love it, whatever. That's just what it is that they're working with right now.
How do you see this game shaping out? Like how much faith do you have going into this one that the Bills can get it done?
I'm pretty faithful. I think that they can get it done. They got embarrassed. I mean, that was Jerry Sullivan's word of the week when they lost to the Patriots. I don't think they allow themselves to be embarrassed again. I don't think that they allow themselves to be controlled like that. When you play opponents more than one time a season, it's potential to play them, on Sunday and then potentially in the playoffs. I don't think that you're going to sit there and let them say, hey, let's see how they come out and we're going to react to it. Like I said earlier, you have to establish the offensive game plan and say, this is what we're going to do and try to stop us. Obviously, the Patriots are going to try doing that, but I just don't see how the Bills allow the Patriots to control the tempo and beat them again. And this is a good team, but it's not a great team. So I could definitely see the Bills at least covering the spread. I mean, that would definitely equate to a win, but
I like that.
I just don't see how the Bills lose another game to a rookie-led quarterback. I mean, Sean McDermott has done too well against rookie quarterbacks to be beaten twice in one season by one.
And Mac Jones is not the second coming of Jesus. He's not the second coming of Tom Brady. Let's pump the brakes, people. I know the Patriots are excited. They feel like they got their Andrew Luck to Peyton Manning or their Rodgers to Favre or their Young to Montana, but let's pump the brakes a little bit. And this is coming from a guy, Kyle, that I watch all the quarterbacks in March heading into the draft in April or May. As we've seen the last couple of years, the draft's been in May. And I love Mac Jones. I thought that if any team got him, if it was the Patriots, that's where he would be his most dangerous. And they picked him, and I thought, okay, this is going to be interesting. And the success isn't really shocking to me, but what's more shocking is the narrative that they've tried to change. I talked about that at the beginning of the show for those of you that missed it that are tuning in now. But your score prediction, I got to get it. I got to have it. What is the Trimble score prediction for this one?
Let's see here. I had a few numbers floating around my head before you finish your sentence there. I'm going to go 27-21 with the Bills' late score to go up and win the game.
Ooh, I'd like that. That's one that I could rub back into the faces of the Patriots fans that are tuning in right now. So I'd say 27-20. You'd say 27-21. I'm going to go 24-20. I think this is going to be a close one, as do you, but I think it's going to be a little bit closer with some field goals back and forth, some touchdowns. I think the Bills are going to win this one. I do see the Bills somewhat having a late score, so that'd mean that the Patriots would have a 20-17 lead late. I think the Bills are going to get a touchdown, and they'll win 24-20. So we both got the Bills winning. Kyle, this is a big, big game. The biggest game of the year to date. The next one is always better. If we win this one, we got the AFC East. We got Atlanta and the Jets to end the season. Is that right?
You cut out a little bit there. Can you repeat that last part?
I said this is the biggest game of the season. What do we have? The Falcons and the Jets to end the season?
Falcons and the Jets, yeah.
Yep. So I don't want to overlook any team. That's not what I like to do on the show. But if I were to look at the last two games of every single team's schedule, I feel like Buffalo's got a pretty good schedule to end the season, wouldn't you? So is the AFC stars if we win this game? God willing, I hope so.
Absolutely. You mentioned the last bit of the schedule there. I mean, I'd hate to be at AFC North or the AFC West. I mean, looking at the Broncos schedule or anybody in the AFC North, their schedule's just – they're playing all division opponents, and it's a tough road for any of those guys to try to. It's going to benefit the Bills, but I'm just looking at Baltimore. They got some tough games coming up. They at Denver. They're supposed to close out with 3 straight AFC West games. I mean, I'll take the Falcons and the Jets to wrap up the season if you can get through the Patriots.
I would too. And you mentioned the AFC North. That's like looking at that division is just mind blowing. I have a 6 division parlay bet. I rarely bet, but this bet was just $10 to win $600. And the Browns have to win that division. If they don't win that division, I lose my $10. If they win the division and all the other teams that I bet I win too, which they're on track to, I'll be $600 richer. So keep your fingers crossed for me.
All right. All right.
Kyle, it's always a pleasure having you on the show. Sorry for the internet issues. It snowed like heck where I'm from in Lockport. So I don't know about you. You might have to get your snowblower out as well. Snow might be headed your way if it hasn't already.
Not yet, but we'll
Not
see.
yet.
It might happen.
Yeah, it snowed pretty bad out here. So I think that and the company that we won't mention have had issues with their internet, as they've told me. So my apologies. But, of course, it's always good to have you on the show. Tell the world where they can find you on social media.
So you can find me on Twitter at Banged Up Bills, on Facebook and Instagram at Banged Up Bills. You can find me at my website, bangedupbills.com. And you can also find my work on Reddit, too, if you're in that world. I'm willing to talk about anything and everything. I'm willing to answer questions. DMs are open. So if you're looking for a player's injury history, if you're looking for that latest week injury or what happened in the game, you saw the guy go out, come to the site, come to my Twitter page. You're going to find it. If you don't find it, ask me. If I don't have the answer, it's because either it's not publicly reported or it doesn't exist. So I'm turning over every stone and looking at every rock in order to find out the latest injury information for the Buffalo Bills.
I love it. I am a frequent viewer, and I've kept up with you, of course. So there has been multiple, guest spots that you've had. I saw you run with Josh Reed of WIVB, good friend of the show. I had him on the show as well a few months back, and you're doing great, Kyle. Keep it up, man. I always love to see you succeeding, and I look forward to having you on the show again.
Yeah, no, this is a ton of fun. I enjoy this. I could have worse hobbies. So if I can talk Buffalo Bills and talk about injuries, being a physical therapist, I'm game.
Yeah, those are two things that you've blended together very well for yourself. So it's always a pleasure having you on the show, Kyle. You take care and stay safe. Things are getting a little crazy out there. Stay safe and enjoy your holiday too. Merry Christmas.
Thank you very much, Ryan.
Thank you, buddy. Take care.
All right, you too. Bye.
That was Kyle Trimble of bangedupbills.com. I always enjoy having Kyle on the show. So informative. Luckily for us, we didn't have as many injuries to talk about, but I had to ask him the simple question based on, the amount of, COVID cases that we have seen on this team. John Feliciano, Dion Dawkins, names that the Buffalo Bills really need on this roster and really need for this game. Cole Beasley now out. He was placed on the COVID-19 reserve COVID-19 list. So I had to ask that question just in terms of has he seen anything quite like it? How busy has it kept him? All that stuff. And obviously he's a physical therapist and injury expert. And I love the comparison that he made in regards to Adrian Peterson's ACL injury when he was in Minnesota with the Vikings in comparison to Trey White's injury with the Buffalo Bills this year, an ACL injury as well. They were, kind of at the same point in the season, and the rehab is a long one. So to Kyle Trimble's words to my ears, it's looking like Troy could potentially miss some time leading into the 2022 NFL season, maybe the first 2 weeks, with the long road ahead for him rehabbing, hit that injury. So, Kyle, always a pleasure having you on the show. And to anyone that was tuning in, I apologize for the internet connection issues. It snowed like heck out here in Western New York, and typically when it snows, the internet is not that good. So haven't had much of a taste of it yet, but I did tonight. But hopefully you guys were able to take a lot from this show. I always enjoy having Kyle on the show. It was great to get a guest back on the show. I look forward to having more guests on the show throughout the rest of the season, and of course during the off season, as I always do. So there it is. the Thomas Take Sports Podcast from yours truly, Ryan Thomas, featuring Kyle Trimble of BangedUpBills.com, the Buffalo Bills Week 16 preview show. The Buffalo Bills taking on the New England Patriots. The AFC East title is on the line. Pride is on the line. Respect is on the line. And the media's attention is on the line. Take care, everybody.